If you're a startup founder and if you already talk with developers or providers, maybe you came across the words Docker, container, or maybe Kubernetes. In today's episode, I'm going to explain what's the difference between a virtual server and what is exactly Docker. And above all, I'm going to explain how you as a startup, maybe you or your team, you can use it and why you should consider it. Hi, I'm Amaury, founder and CEO at My CTO Friend, where founders come to learn how to build their tech startup. With this Startup Snack series available on both podcast and YouTube, we want to share the essential to make it easier for you to build your tech startup. In 1998, a startup called VMware made the concept of virtual machine available for everyone. So thanks to VMware, I remember launching Windows 98 on my Linux laptop more than 20 years ago. It was great. But you know, the virtual machine concept has not always been optimized because the real computer which hosts virtual machines has to share resources like the CPU, the memory, and it also needs to allocate a big chunk of the hard drive to create a virtual hard drive. And virtual machines are not always been very optimized because also it has to emulate the real computer, emulate the CPU, emulate the RAM, etc., etc. So that's a lot of waste of resources that are dedicated to the virtualization side. So that being said, I discovered the concept of container in 2006. I even wrote an article at that time for a French Linux magazine and about that concept. And it was called more jail mechanism or Linux vServer at that time. And this concept allows basically to just create a directory and to emulate inside that directory an operating system without actually launching a real operating system. It was just isolating things with a program inside the directory with a dedicated network configuration. And that's it. And since then, things became more popular and easier thanks to Docker. So inside the Docker container, you will be able to find whatever the application, libraries or external softwares that are required for your application. You can find files, you can find configurations, and you can also find database. So now you might wonder, but so what? What's the point for me as a startup? Well, I'm going to tell you how Docker can really help not only your technical team, your developer, or your provider, but also you as a startup founder, even if you don't have technical background. So there are three advantages of using Docker. The first one is that it's very useful for developers to set up new environments. Very useful for also scalable infrastructure because it allows to run application in parallel multiple times. And it's also very useful to save pre-configured application with everything required. And that's where it's going to be useful for you as a non-technical founder. Because if you want to prototype something, to maybe test what you can do with a WordPress plugin or with a solution open source like an e-commerce solution open source, etc., then maybe you will want to test it right away on your computer. And that's what we will be able to do. The same thing with Strapi as example. Strapi is a great solution to manage your database very easily just by clicking. It's like not an Excel spreadsheet, but it's a database that you can manage even without technical background and that your developer can use with his application. So if I want to test these three applications that are pretty complex to install, that requires tons of installation on servers, etc., I can do it in just 2 minutes thanks to Docker, and I'm going to show you exactly how if you are on YouTube. If you're on podcast, know that this video is available on YouTube. So on Docker, you have images. So images are kind of application templates, and we can search for application templates on hub.docker.com. Then there I can just research for like WordPress, for example, and it's going to show me or to give me directly the command that I can put on my terminal just to install on my computer the Docker image. That's not complex. Don't run away. It's not complex. Just copy and paste that on your computer, and then you install whatever application. Same thing with PrestaShop. I can copy the PrestaShop line that is on hub.docker.com, and then it allows me to install on my computer the PrestaShop image. And that's going to be exactly the same thing if I research for any other type of open source software, like Strapi, for the example. I copy and paste the Strapi command line once the previous one are finished, and boom, I have now on my Docker application the 3 images that are ready to run. And that's where I want to introduce the principle of container. The container are the running application. And before to run an image in a container, we need to define a port. A port is a dedicated port for running an application. Like as example for WordPress, I set 20,080. I'm going to put another port. Each application has to have a different port. 20,081 for PrestaShop as example. And last, if I deploy also Strapi, the Strapi image, I can add the 20,082 for the port for Strapi. And that's it. I clicked on the run button, and now I can access to my 3 application just by clicking on the containers and by clicking on the button open in browser. And then boom, I have my installation tutorial for WordPress. I have the same thing for PrestaShop, the installation tutorials, and I will have exactly the same with Strapi. And I am able, and I was able to do it in the same time. I was able to install complex application thanks to Docker in just few clicks and just by copying and paste the reference to this application. And that's just awesome. So what's important to know is that it's not only for other applications, but it's also for your own developers. Your own developers can create your own environment, and you can have your own application in a Docker environment that you can run on your own laptop just to demonstrate your application to investors or whoever you want to show your application to without technical background, without having complex things to configure on your computer. So there is now one more thing that I would like to share about container and about Docker. It's that you cannot usually store long-term information inside a container, especially on production, because on production, we can run several containers in parallel, so we are not going to be able to access to the same data from the inside of one container to another container. That's why. That's the design of a container by definition. So that's why we need to use shared directory or shared database, which are going to be external of the container and usually stored on your cloud providers. And that leads me to introduce the concept of Kubernetes. Kubernetes is a software that is run by your cloud providers to manage all your applications that are deployed inside containers. That's a container orchestration tool, But that's not really important for you as a non-technical founder or even as a leader of a technical team. You don't really need to worry about that because that's on the cloud provider side. It's only if you would run your own cloud infrastructure and running your own container management things, then you would need to worry about Kubernetes. But usually Amazon Web Services, Google, even Azure, Microsoft, they manage with Kubernetes, and that's very easy because it also allows you to switch from one cloud provider to another very easily. It's just very, a matter of being compatible with all of them. So in conclusion, Docker is very useful for developers to set up new environments. It's also very useful for scalable infrastructure and to save pre-configured application with everything required. And as a startup founder, you can, thanks to Docker, run any type of open source software on your computer or also your own application. And it's also safe because it's inside a container. So you can test any application that you found on the web inside a container, and you are not going to be able to harm your computer if there is even a virus or anything inside. So that's why it's a great tool as well. If you enjoy learning with us and if you want to learn more, consider subscribing. help us spread the word by hitting the like button or by sharing with your entrepreneur friends. And if you have any question or want to suggest a topic, feel free to comment down below, or you can also check out our website to learn more about our program and how you can join.